The Portland Trail Blazers battled valiantly with the Utah Jazz on Friday, and with only 7 players available in the fourth quarter, had managed to right the ship and get back in this game late. With an incredible game-tying three-pointer that could have easily been a 4-point play, Damian Lillard continued his smoking red-hot scoring. And when he hit this tough runner, getting the shooter's roll, we were in for an ending for the ages. Not to be outdone, Donovan Mitchell exploded for an off-foot layup that gave the Jazz the 2-point lead. And that led to an unbelievable sequence of events on the next possession for Portland. But when I say unbelievable, I really mean, what the fuck were the refs thinking? And it was enough for me to bring in Ronnie Nunn, who was an NBA referee for 19 years, head of officials for 5, and director of development for 3 more, to have him give us his expert opinion on a couple of plays from this game. Ronnie, thank you so much for joining us. We have some plays to go through because, like Damian Lillard, a lot of the Portland Trail Blazers fans were really upset about the recent game against the Jazz. And before we get to the final fireworks, I thought we could look at maybe one play that kind of went under the radar. A chippy game, a lot of trash talk, a lot of physicality. But let's look at a three-point shot that Damian Lillard got, because I think it was interesting based on how you process this from a referee standpoint and whether this should have been called a foul. So, Ronnie, what do you see here?
Well, first of all, great to be with you, Coach. The key to this play is this is the shot in this sequence. And when you have a shot in a sequence, you've got to have 2 sets of eyes on the shooter, because that's the only play in town at the very moment. And 2 sides of the officials, the one that is to the left of the shooter, Damian Lillard, and the one that he's coming towards, these are the 2 guys that can see it. And what we do see is there is a clip by the knee and the heel, the knee of the defender and the heel of Lillard, and that could throw him off. And yes, it could have been a foul. But it's an illusionary play. You've got to really see it well to be sure. And guess what? We don't have a lot of knee to heel contacts. So, they're looking more body. They're looking for the swerve. They're looking for the bump. And so that play could be missed. And any of us could have missed it, including any fan anywhere and any announcer anywhere. So it's very tough to see. So I got to give the officials the benefit of the doubt on that one.
Well, fair enough. And certainly the way we're seeing offensive players attack out of the pick and roll, that hyper-quick pull-up off the dribble has been catching a lot of defenders running into them or desperately trying to get out of the way. So there's no question going forward that the referees are going to need to do something more to adjudicate those plays, because I have a feeling that we're going to see a lot more of all sorts of potential contact from behind, maybe up in the back of the head area as they try and wave their hand, and then certainly down low.
All the points you just made are absolutely excellent. And that's the messaging that needs to be sent to the officials. It's the kind of coaching mentality that's going on that officials could take advantage of. That's why 2 sets of eyes on this play involved 4 players. If you're involved in 4 players anywhere on the court, you need 2 sets of eyes. And that's easy to be done, except it has to be a focus.
Well, let's bring us to the final play here in the regulation, where we probably needed 3 sets of eyes on this one, because down 2, remember, when you're down 2, you have to go as quickly as possible to get a shot, the best shot you can, because the game and that clock is working against you. So Damian Lillard gets right by Rudy Gobert. There's some help defense, and even in real time, the announcers were kind of freaking out a little bit because it was clear what happened. But Ronnie, walk us through what you see on this play and how you can explain how there was no whistle and how that affected the rest of the game.
Well, I think the primary situation right there, everything was good, and the dart to the hoop by Lillard was excellent. And the problem is, here comes the secondary defender. And prior to the secondary defender, here comes the primary defender. So people are going to right away say, did that defender on his trajectory, did he have enough of a slant to create that body bump? In my view, there was some slant, but he's also holding on to verticality to some degree. There's a little slant, but there's some verticality. The problem is, if our official is looking at Damian Lillard and watches how his body turns as if he was hit more than he was, it makes it appear more of a foul. And as we look at it and we look at it again, I like the no call there. I know there'll be some disagreements, but I like the no call there. On the other side of this with the secondary defender, which is Gobert, that's a play we have to get because that's the secondary guy who's going to cause us trouble. Once we release from the primary, you've got to pick up the secondary. And guess what? He goaltends. It's an easy play, but it surprises us.
So let's not forget the rule is if the ball is being shot off the backboard and it hits first and then blocked, it is a no-brainer goaltend. Let me ask you this. So, and I think I disagree with you on this one. I think that there's a pretty significant collision in the air. And I know he's got his arms straight up, and that looks good, but I definitely feel like there's some vector drifting into him as well. But and this could very well be one of those things where people would say, oh, they're not gonna call that, at the end of the game, let the players decide all that stuff. And we've had that conversation a lot. But is there a component to like pass interference in football? If that shot wasn't going to go in, is there a component where you might hit that ball and they might not blow that whistle?
Well, I don't think we should use as a criteria if that ball can get in the hoop. I mean, it's nice that way because it helps the official to say, thank goodness the ball got in there. And with my questioning, it would look worse for me if the ball didn't get in. And that's just common human reaction. The bottom line is to focus and not worry about whether the ball goes in or not. Focus to whether the defender, to your term, which is a great term, vectored into him illegally. And I think it's tight and I think it's close. So for some reason, I think also the official might have wanted to creep in. Now he's between the two Z's and Jazz, and that drive is coming down towards the lane line. If you don't get in to that pocket like a quarterback and move to the A and then get yourself out of the way and get back to the Z's, then you can see if you have that bump. I think where he's at, he's not really seeing, because it's illusionary sometimes, whether the bump is enough. So to your point, I get for those who think there is something there, and I get it, but the official's got a great look if he comes in at least between the A and the Z. So the second part is our trail official, which is in the back. He's got to recognize that drive is really his lead's drive. What is he looking for? All the next things occur. What are they? Rebounders, goaltending, basket interference. So he's got to get onto the court and see that. Instead, he runs downward, and I think he takes himself out of the play a little bit. Now, this is basketball referee talk, and the referees will know what I'm saying when they hear this. But some of the folks need to learn that those are the key things officials must do, just like you're running the offense. There's cuts and things that you got to make to get open. He's working to get open. I don't think he did it as well as he should have.
Fair enough. And if only Caleb Swanigan would have been able to just get the tip in, it wouldn't have mattered. The ball would have gone in and tied the game. Is there a tiny component of Joe Ingles' hand on his back, which would indicate why he jumps so far forward and can't grab that ball? Yeah, maybe. So more reason for the Blazer fans to maybe be mad. But again, I do feel like that ball does hit in a way where, it probably, the way it's coming off the board, wasn't going to go in the basket. But again, like you said, I don't think it simply doesn't matter. You have to allow that to happen and see what it does. And if you hit anywhere near that rim, that's going to be a goaltend. So a really, really tough one. And this reminded me of an end of play that happened last month with the Jazz and the New Orleans Pelicans, where there was only 0.2 seconds left. The Pelicans had, fought valiantly the whole time and had grabbed hold of this game at the end. They're up by one. There's only a little bit of things that you can do with a 0.2 on the clock. So Ronnie, tell us what in the rules it says you're allowed to do as far as touching the ball with that little time left.
Well, here's the key to this whole throw-in. First of all, before the referee gives the ball to the thrower in, everything is dead. Now, all of a sudden, he gives it to him. Just like you give it to a free throw shooter, the ball is now live. And on the release, it's called alive. So the only thing that can happen on a foul on the release is like a regular foul that we would have in the game if the dribbler was dribbling and he passed the ball. So this is a foul off the ball, but it is not a foul without the ball release, which gives you a different rule.
Right. So what happens if what happens if Ingles still had his hands on the ball, hadn't passed it, and they call that foul?
Well, then that's an away from the play foul. we would get one shot, the team that was the team that was offended, and they would get one shot and the ball back, which is be great. You know, you get ready to set something else up if you like. But in this case, everything was free. The ball goes, and the clock cannot move until the ball is tipped. So the only play we could have with .2 is a tip. There's no possession of this ball that can occur on this play. So guess what? If you're officiating or if you're playing, everybody knows the ball is going to the hoop. And may I add, it could be on a downward trajectory and not a goaltend. So the ball could have been directly passed to the hoop as if it were a shot. And guess what? All else, if it went in, it wouldn't have counted without anybody touching it. So this is a play at the hoop. And the problem is, what do the referees see where somebody doesn't get a chance to leap and tip that ball? That is what they're looking for. Is anybody being held down? Is anybody being dislodged in a way where their jump is not a pure one amongst the others?
So we end up getting this foul call on Jackson Hayes way on the other side of the court. It kind of came out of nowhere, was a little bit shocking to everybody. And it was, you know, it took a long time for you and I to both go through this frame by frame, multiple angles, to really pick apart what was going on. Just in the overall sense, Ronnie, do you agree that this was a good call?
You know what? There are times when I look at film and we both look at it, sometimes the angle's not given to us or the fans or the camera or what have you. Maybe there is a camera out there somewhere that they didn't bring to our attention. But the bottom line is, I've got to go with the official and believe something impeded Gobert's ability to get to the ball, whether it was Favors, whether it was his teammate behind Gobert. Somebody didn't allow him for that free jump that I was referring to. And I'm going to go with the official's sense of judgment here because he's seen something that created this problem and created the foul. The good news is, and people have to remember, we've got to stop thinking about let the players win the game. This is a prime example of .2 on the clock where the officials are still in the game as they should be. So forget all the other noise about those that want to say, how could you call that at the end of the game? And the others that say, how could you not call that at the end of the game? So they're in the game. They're in the pocket. He sees something. We can't see it. I'm all for him. And by the way, usually the honesty of the game comes out right.
Sure. For what it's worth, you know, I could see Jackson Hayes clamping on Rudy Gobert and maybe holding him, and I could see why the referee would say that's too far because it is a tip and he needs to have his arm free at least to try and get up there. So I could see why that would have been called a little bit. I mean, it was still shocking. We know Rudy is doing his share of grabbing and tussling as well. Very difficult situation to have to referee because you know that they're going to be as physical as they possibly can be on a throw-in like this. Did you ever have a game like this when you were playing, refereeing the NBA where you had to deal with a .2, or did they have it when you were refereeing the 10ths?
They certainly did have it. I'm not that old. Thanks,
Sorry.
Nick.
Well, wait, it's still somewhat new, isn't it?
Well, I have to tell you something. I must confess that the .3 and the .1, and .3 got to be .3 because I scored a shot on a .1.
Oh,
and,
wait, was that the Knicks Bulls?
Yeah, it was Knicks Bulls, and the reason why the thinking was, in order to give purity to a game, instead of doing it technically like I should have, I gave more purity to the game and said, okay, once the ball is caught, that's when I'm going to chop to say start the clock. And that's when you chop and then the timer says, now I'm going to start it. Guess what? We no longer are at .1. And so they made the rule to .3 that a possession can occur and a shot from that possession. So in a way, it's one of the worst memories I have. But at the same token, I also learned how certain things cannot happen and we shouldn't allow it to happen by way of just a human response. Technology or data or some things of that nature really answer the question because it's too quick for our eyes or it's too quick for our minds. And in my case, it was too quick to chop and have my timer follow the chop. And then all of a sudden, the ball goes in the hoop, as Murphy's Law would have it.
however you felt, you can imagine that you created a whole wave of anxiety back in Chicago, especially the young kid watching the game on TV back then. Before I was called Coach Nick, I was just probably Nicky back then. That was we were really. I'll never forget that one. But I can't believe that was you. Now I realize that's amazing serendipity that here we are together to talk about plays now.
And I don't know if we still have it completely right on point three sometimes, but it is what it is. And I guess one day, until we wire a ball and know exactly that the ball and the clock are timed together, will we ever know on a release? I mean, maybe the release is 0.4, maybe the release is 0.5. But right now, it's a good place at 0.3. It can't be at 0.1 and 0.2. And no one knows that rule better than me. Let me put it to you that way.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Ronnie, for breaking this down and giving us the insights that we need. I'm really looking forward to this because I know that going forward, as we get closer to the playoffs and in the playoffs, you and I will be together and we'll go through a lot of these plays as the interest really starts to ramp up between now and then. I can't wait for it to get out to check out some more plays.
Yeah, it's great. This was a great one, Nick. I'm glad you got me while I was dealing with the grandkids, but so glad we got it put in, and thank you so much for reaching out.
You got it. And don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Ronnie?
I am in all the time. Thanks, Coach Nick.